Hello everyone, this is Strati Papa Giorgio,
and Father Michael Tischel,
and we are
an
Imperfect Podcast. So, Father Michael,
here we are.
Here we are. So, this is there's a huge topic that I think, a huge topic that I think is so important for the youth, and not just the youth. Obviously, it's it's all ages. But what is faith, and how can we understand what faith really means as something we implement in our lives?
Right.
As rather than just an abstract concept.
Right.
That faith.
Right. How can it become
what
real?
Is it? Real,
potent, powerful.
Potent, powerful, and meaningful.
Meaningful, yep. Great questions. Well, I think a helpful place to start when we talk about faith is probably dispelling any kind of misconceptions as far as, what faith is not, and sort of common understandings or perceptions or ideas about faith that maybe we throw around and are ultimately unhelpful and kind of leading us away from the real central core of our understanding of faith. So, when I think about faith, a lot of times I cringe. And I don't cringe because I'm a
faith hater,
or an agnostic, a crypto agnostic within the Orthodox Church, just to kind of name that very clearly.
Make that abundantly clear that you, Father Michael,
Father Michael is
not a agnostic,
a crypto agnostic. Nope. Definitely want to be here.
Right. And believe.
Okay. Yes. So when I hear the word faith,
so why do you cringe?
Yeah, I cringe because I think there are a lot of ways to understand faith that are unhelpful. Let's start just with one. For instance, I think faith is often associated with ideology. Mm-hmm. I'm a big believer in recycling. I'm a big believer in making sure that the poor are taken care of. I'm a big believer in this and that. My cause, my belief, my ideology. It's like, it's important. It's kind of a principle that I believe in. I try to adhere to, but it's static, and it is an idea. It's something, because it's static and because it's an idea. It's something that I can assent to. I can sort of check off, and in many ways sort of put to the side and kind of put aside and not have it really impact my everyday.
And I think another thing in the the broader sense of the world that we live in, the people talk about faiths.
Yes.
Plural.
Right.
And there are many faiths, and everybody has one, or there's Islam, there's Buddhism. Right. These are all faiths.
Yeah.
And they kind of take faith, the word faith, and make it a
kind of a religion.
A hashtag. Let's make it real.
Gotta love the hashtag. Jimmy Fallon.
So that whole thing, it's been trivialized to such an extent in our culture. I don't know, Western society. I know, at least here in the United States, it's so trivialized and so overused. And there are other words as well that have been so overused in this culture. But faith, one of the most powerful things, one of the deepest things that we were just talking about right before we went on, it has been trivialized.
Yes. Yeah. So that trivialization, that kind of over familiarity with a term, maybe.
Yeah.
Where it's just like it's thrown around. It's kind of, it's it's kind of we're burnt out on.
You watch the news. You're a person of faith, right? Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I'm a person of faith.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So it's
person of faith.
A person of faith. It's someone who believes.
Right.
Well, who doesn't believe?
Sure.
That's really the question. Is when it really comes down to it, what is belief, and could we say that isn't it inherent? Isn't it fundamental to the human experience? Mm-hmm. What do I mean? It's not even a matter of whether you're religious, non-religious, whether you're a theist, an atheist, an agnostic, whatever. Whether you believe or not. I think belief, faith, is so much more fundamental to our human experience than just whether you're religious or not. I think it has to do with being able to live and move and operate while not having all of the data points in front of you. Mm-hmm. So it's like, here we are, we're living, I'm about to board an airplane and,
you have faith that plane's not going to fall.
Yeah, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a.
I don't know how
an
it goes
engineer.
up there.
Yeah, like I don't know all of the data points, right?
Sure.
What allows me, in my right mind, to step foot on that plane and believe that this huge hunk of metal is going to go bulleting through the air at thousands of miles high, and that we're going to actually make it to Boston, where we planned to arrive.
That's a great metaphor for the whole for the beginning of this discussion. You
don't have to be a religious person to have faith.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, even an atheist can have faith that there is no God.
Yeah, you could have faith that there is no God, that you can't see, right? Either way. Right. So it's like you have to believe one way or the other, and you have to have faith that pilot, that those engineers who crafted this airplane, you have to have faith in something.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
You can't not have faith in something.
Well, you'll never leave your house.
Yeah.
And even then.
You're having faith in your
the
fear.
The house won't fall on you.
Well, yeah, that. And you're having faith in your fears that are preventing you to leave the house. Right?
Yeah.
So there is a level of faith that's just on the level of thought and of accepting certain thoughts. Right. I mean, any psychologist, especially those who deal with like cognitive behavioral therapy and things like that, will tell you that it's all about these automatic thoughts that come into our consciousness that we can't necessarily choose one way or the other. But what we do and are able to choose is whether we believe them or not. Mm. So it's like you see those bumper stickers that actually often, I think it comes from the whole realm of cognitive behavioral therapy, is don't believe everything that you think.
Right.
We think a lot of stuff.
Everything that you think, yeah, sure.
About yourself, about your own value, your own, right? Like you have all these negative thoughts, and the more that we mature, the more we realize that as human beings living in this broken world, our thoughts tend towards the negative. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And negative certainties about the world. Right? Yeah. I am certain that things aren't going to work out. I'm certain that I'm a horrible person. I'm certain that I'm stupid. I'm certain that I'm this. I'm certain that I'm that. And most of it is negative. Yeah. Right? And that thought has automatically entered into my consciousness. Yeah. And without almost knowing it, I've believed it. Mm-hmm. There's a level of belief that happens on a very subtle, fine level that allows me to hook onto that thought. Right. So the question is belief, is it a religious thing? Is it not religious? No, it's fundamental to who we are as human beings. Right. It's basically this action of trust. Yeah. Right?
It's a normal human thing.
It's a normal human
You're
thing.
born into the world, you believe what you're seeing.
You believe what you're seeing.
You believe that the world has shapes and colors.
Right. Yeah.
You believe, when you're small, you believe that your mom is always there.
Right. So that's even these very kind of primal, primitive.
Right. The first things you believe in are your parents.
Your parents and the security that they're giving you. Right. And that's like instinct almost. I mean, that's like right out of the womb.
You need that.
Right out of the womb, you see the children groping for their mothers, for their source, their milk source. Sure. Right. So it's like instinct to trust, to to trust in the security of your parents. Faith is an instinct.
Right. Faith is an instinct. So having said all of that, right, we go off the very fact that having faith period and believing period is just normal.
Right.
Everybody is born doing it.
Yep.
So what does it mean to have faith in Christ?
Right.
And what does it mean to have faith in the next life? You know, what happens after you die?
Yeah.
You know.
And here's a good opportunity to dispel another perhaps misconception about faith.
Yeah.
This is essentially, I think, an argument that many folks who are either disenchanted with or vehemently opposed to religious belief or kind of religiosity of any sort of throw at religious people.
Right.
Which is to say that they basically think that religion is an opium, right? To use Marx's, the opiate of the masses is an escapism, is a form of being able to cope with and escape from the banality and the reality of
everything is
nothing, meaningless. And when you die, you're over.
Yeah,
you're done.
So, right. So saying basically, there really is nothing after. But go ahead believing.
Right. It's going to get you through until
until the reality happens that you're nothing.
That you. Yeah.
It's very interesting.
So faith as a coping mechanism, as a fake coping mechanism.
Yeah, a placebo.
Right.
Placebo effect.
Exactly.
It's the placebo effect.
Just to get you through this meaningless existence, so that when you die, you'll at least be able to be less agonized until that moment of.
And I've always because I've always wondered, like, people who say they're atheists, what do they
believe in?
What do they cling to? Or what
do they cling to? Yeah. Well,
is it just their day-to-day jobs, or is it just...
Yeah. I think that's a complex question.
Very complex, maybe for another time.
Well, no, but it's very related in the sense that, in many ways, being an atheist or being a believer is somewhat of a mystery. What leads someone to belief in God, and what leads someone to belief in no God? How do they come to that? I mean, I think, there are ways in which, there's the poor witness of people of faith, Christians, that could sort of turn someone off to the faith. There's our own ego, that could say, well, I don't need a God. I can do it on my own, right? And then there's simply, and these categories, I'm using these categories, but they're from Abbot George of Grigoriou of blessed memory. He was the one who kind of first...
Grigoriou on Mount Athos. Okay, the monastery.
Exactly, yeah. He was the one who first kind of keyed me into these kind of three categories of unbelief. The third is that God simply hasn't revealed himself to that person yet. Because God is a living God and doesn't necessarily work on our timing.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a complex question, and, an atheist would say, well, there's a fourth category, which is just to say there is no God, so that's why I'm an atheist.
Well, it's also, important to point out that the atheism that we understand today is pretty recent. Like, there wasn't this type of atheism 3, 4, 5, 600 years ago. Buddhism has a form of atheism in the sense that, that's a whole other thing.
Sure.
But it's not quite atheism in the way that we see today. The vast majority of human history, it has always been understood that there is a God.
Right.
There are deities.
Yes.
Whether they be many deities, one deity, two deities, 3, 4, whatever.
Yeah, that belief in the supernatural.
There has to be, it's always been a given, there is a supernatural.
Right.
Until the modern day.
Yes.
Past, 200 years maybe.
Right. And it's a very good question as far as how we got there.
There's a whole other topic.
There's a whole other topic, and there's an excellent book out there called A Secular Age by Charles Taylor, in which he essentially traces the historical progression of secularism from the medieval period, where secularism basically meant it had to do with occupation. It's like you have your religious occupation, your secular occupation.
Sure.
It's like So then he says, well, then there's this, that's secular 1. Secular 2 is kind of this ability to compartmentalize life into the religious sphere, the secular sphere, and there's this kind of war, between religious and secular. And then the secular age in which we live today is a whole another kind of secularism that basically allows for us to see that there are so many different kinds of faith that, where we all live next to each other, and there's this kind of fragilization of faith and belief. Everything's contestable, which is intense and challenging for the person of faith, for the Christian, but it's also equally as intense and challenging for the atheist, because you can no longer be sort of a staunch believer in any level. There's always going to be this sense of fragility, I guess you could say. So with what Charles Taylor talks about as far as the fragilization of faith, and I'm no expert, I haven't delved into his resource. I've kind of heard some of his talks and read around him with other people that have read him. But as far as this whole notion of the fragilization of faith, I think one of the things that it does is it breaks down the barriers between the believers and non-believers, in the sense that everybody's affected by secularism in a negative sense. But if we're talking about it as far as the growth of Christianity or people of faith, everybody's affected by it in a positive sense, insofar as the non-believers are now haunted by the possibility of belief. Just as the believers are haunted by the doubt and the possibility of unbelief, non-believers are haunted by the possibility of faith. And there is not this kind of clear, like...
black and white.
Right, black and white.
Like nothing is.
Like never. Things are almost never.
Almost never. There is one thing, and that's Christ. And that's definitely
right.
Black and
it's
white.
Clear.
But
it's evident.
But
yeah,
the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Shades.
Right, and so when it comes to faith, the place that takes me as far as this progression and this ultimate fragilization of faith is actually to a beautiful place. Because it can be scary if you are sort of a person that needs these kinds of like tightly held certainties, and kind of like, I need to have it all figured out in my life.
Yeah, well, wouldn't you say that, I mean, everybody's different, but wouldn't you say that faith also something that grows from family?
Sure.
You're raised in a faith, in a religion, and so when you're an adult, you're supposed to know the things you were taught as a kid.
Right.
And that actually segues to, that portion of people that are in the probably the most tumultuous time in their life, people who go transition to college.
Right.
And it's everything they were ever taught, when they get there, will be challenged.
Absolutely.
So, I guess what is faith as far as Christ, how he taught it,
right,
and what he meant by it, and how the fathers of the church, the saints, the holy people, how did they describe faith? And surely through that we can find the answer as to how we should also approach it. Would you agree?
I would agree. And I think that the fragilization of our faith humbles us. Because counterintuitively, the certainties that we feel like we need to grasp with a tight fist, right?
Yeah.
Are actually oftentimes ways for us to be in control in a sort of like self-deifying kind of way. So in many ways, I think letting go of the certainties and humbly saying, I believe, Lord, help my unbelief.
That's what you mean.
Right.
Yeah.
Opens up
cracks
in the pavement for the pavement of our kind of.
So what you're saying is, don't be afraid to have a little unbelief.
Don't be afraid to accept your
fragility,
your fragility, which is a product of the age in which we live.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to accept the reality, the concrete reality, the concrete fragile reality in which we live. Right.
Oxymoron.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to do that.
True,
as frightening as it may be, because we have to humbly accept this environment. And then when we do that, it's then in this acceptance of that the real God, the real and living God, made manifest through the person of Jesus Christ, within the context of the church,
right,
can reveal himself.
So give us the example from the gospel,
right,
which you just referenced to.
Right. So this person comes to Christ asking for healing on behalf of a loved one. I think it was his son who was a demoniac. I don't remember exactly the context, but it was something like that. And Christ asks him, well, do you believe that this can be done, essentially, right?
Right.
And this is a very crucial moment, this question of, do you believe? Do you have faith? Mm-hmm. Because for this man, it wasn't black or white. Mm-hmm. It wasn't, well, yeah, of course I believe. You could do anything. I have total faith in you.
Right.
Right? Like we oftentimes feel like we should have.
Right.
Like we beat ourselves up all the time saying, well, I should be able to believe. I try to believe, but I can't, and therefore I'm just going to give it all up and
right,
to heck with it.
To heck.
Or conversely saying, well, yeah, it kind of goes back and forth between that pendulum of either, I should have this certainty and this kind of perfect faith, or I'm never going to have it, so I give up, whatever. There's an in-between, and that in-between is find that small mustard seed of faith. Find that tiny glimmer of faith in your life, whether it was from your childhood when, you said a little prayer to God and something happened, or, that confirmation, that affirmation that there's something more, that there's someone more in your life, as small and as insignificant and as minute as it may be. Identify that and say, I believe. It may not be a big belief. It may not be a big assurance. It may not be a big thing. It may be as tiny as a hope, a frail, feeble hope that there is something more or someone more. Mm-hmm. And in that identification, in that awareness of that tiny little seed of faith, ask humbly for more faith.
Right.
And realize and recognize
that's what he did.
That's what he did.
Yeah.
That it's not on you.
Which is a twist, really, in what you would expect. Yes, like you said before. Yeah, sure, I believe.
Yeah, it's either yeah, sure, or are you kidding me? I don't believe.
This is my last. I'm doing this because I don't believe, but sure.
Right, exactly.
Sure.
Yeah, whatever you say.
Whatever you say.
Yeah. So that either or, haunts us.
I think it does.
It haunts us that I either should be hot or cold.
And I think that there's you feel guilty.
You feel guilty.
Especially
if you've grown up in the church and you're suddenly faced with some doubt or some challenging.
Absolutely.
Yep. You feel very guilty.
But also the ability to discern that you feel guilty.
Right.
That's good.
Yep.
Because you have the discernment to identify something's not right. I don't feel right.
Yeah. You're unsettled.
And I think that and I've seen a lot of kids when they go and they've been challenged and they come back and they said, I just it felt so wrong.
Right.
I felt bad because of the way I felt.
Right.
And that mustard seed that you're talking about, that little bit of, even turning it around, a little bit of faith, if you have a little bit of faith.
Yes.
That mustard seed can blossom as well.
Yes.
So it again, nothing's black and white, and I like how that it could be you have a lot of faith, but maybe you doubted and you feel guilty,
right.
or you have a little bit of faith, but that little faith can become a lot of faith.
Right, and that a lot of faith that you had or that you think you had growing up in the church.
Oh, sure.
Right? In many cases, and I don't mean to, if someone didn't have this, I don't want to kind of sort of project that on them, but in many cases that that amazing faith that you thought you had that's now being shaken, right? Isn't faith in the utmost definition of the word. What it is, in my opinion, is, to use kind of psychological language, it's this idealized image that we have of ourselves, that we ought to be perfect.
There's an ego.
So it's this sense that I ought to be God without God. I ought to be perfect, even in a religious sense. I ought to have perfect faith, and because I grew up in the church,
day one,
from day one, right? Like, there's no reason why I shouldn't have perfect faith, and I have this subconscious idea of myself as being this perfect believer without any doubts. And the day that idealized image starts to be attacked, and that there start to become these chinks in the armor of my idealized image, now all of a sudden everything starts to shake,
right?
And my whole foundation starts to shake, and oftentimes crumble, right?
Right.
So this is the crucial moment: is what do I do when my idealized image has crumbled?
Yeah.
As far as faith is concerned.
Right.
And I think there are different responses to that. There's the one response, which is to say, to heck with it all. I don't believe in anything anymore. I'm just going to go off and be something else, or a nihilist or whatever, and just kind of rebel against any kind of faith or any kind of religiosity or anything like that. Another one is, because you're so terrified that your idealized image, that this armor has sort of crumbled, you start to try and piece it back together again. And you start to try and recreate this idealized image in a very manufactured, very kind of self-centered kind of way, right? And that is a very agonizing process. But there's a third way. I think the third way is the way of this man in the gospel, who in sort of being challenged by Christ in this very real and very hard way, do you believe, right? In other words, Christ, in many ways you could say, shattered any potential for an idealized image this man had by asking him, do you believe? He raised it with a Z to the ground, right? Instead of either just saying, to heck with you, Lord, or yes, I believe, let me reconstruct this image, in this very kind of panicky way. He said, he looked at the ruins, right? He looked in the rubble.
He looked at his own heart and soul.
The rubble that was the idealized image and then his heart and soul in the midst of that, beneath that. Mm-hmm. And he found that kernel, that ember, that burning ember in the rubble, that was whatever tiny remains or whatever tiny kind of seed of faith that he had, and he said, yes, I believe. But then he looked around at all the rubble, the crazy destroyed image that he had, and he gave it all to the Lord.
Right.
Instead of trying to reconstruct it himself, he gave that seed and everything else to the Lord, and he said, Lord, help my unbelief.
Help my unbelief. That's a powerful prayer.
It's a powerful prayer, and what did it produce?
He healed the son of this man.
Right. So if we ever want any real, effective, powerful action from God in our lives, whether it's physical healing, whether it's spiritual healing, whether it's emotional healing, whatever it is, there's that process of allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and allowing ourselves to recognize our...
And humility.
Exactly. Which is all humility. This whole thing is humility.
We're all
that's what we're talking about.
That's the core of it all.
Offering up my broken, imperfect offering to the Lord.
I offer up my fears. I offer up my anguish, my anger even.
Sure.
Just offer it all up and let go of yourself and let him sort of rebuild all that that's fallen apart.
And I think this is an interesting point that I've contemplated before, is in the midst of offering up all the fears and the anguish and the brokenness, which is the unbelief, you could say, is associated with the unbelief. We are finding, we're first striving to identify that kernel of belief, of faith. And that's hard. That's a hard word in many ways, because it's like we're not called to have this perfect, huge faith, right? That's not what God is calling us to. But I think there is something about looking for that ember, that tiny flame, as subdued and suppressed as it may be inside of us, looking for that before we offer up all the other crumbled stuff. Mm-hmm. I think there's something about identifying that to offer up with everything else that is very powerful about this story.
Right.
I believe.
Yeah.
Is there even the tiniest flicker of hope in God, or hope that there is a God, or childhood story, as I was saying before, that I prayed and something came true, or some sort of small flame that I can say I do believe, as small as it may be, as feeble as it may be, as weak as it may be, I do believe.
Yeah.
Help all this other stuff that I have going on here.
Yeah, and allow God to strengthen you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we have to offer something. We have to offer him, and it's not even a matter of having to offer him something in this kind of imperative kind of way. It's what can we offer God, as small, as feeble, as fragile as it may be? What small flame of light and of hope and of faith in something more than ourselves and something beyond ourselves can we offer up to God in the midst of all of the rubble of our brokenness and our imperfections and our sinfulness?
And what does he want?
What does he want? A broken and contrite heart God will not despise.
Right.
So he wants our heart.
Yeah.
He wants that beautiful heart that he created, that's been marred by sin and imperfection and ego and the world, and that is now not rebuilt in some manufactured, egotistical way,
right,
but now broken and contrite, that's in humility offered up back to him,
right,
is the pleasing and acceptable offering that he desires.
Yeah. And I think that's something each person has to contend with on their own, right? There's as many books as you read, there's really it's not like building something from IKEA.
Right.
Right? It's
there's no manual.
There's no manual, really.
Right. There are principles, there are guides,
Sure. But it's more of a self-discovery thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and we have to all come to this place in ourselves where we deep down deeply believe and acknowledge that we cannot be our own gods. Mm-hmm. It's not going to work. It's not effective. It's not sustainable. And that ultimately we come to this place where we have accepted that, we have acknowledged that, and we have surrendered ourselves to the living God, the creator of the universe, the only one who can actually sustain, nourish, empower us to be who we were meant to be. Otherwise, anything short of that is agonizing and chasing after an illusion, and we'll never actually find what we were looking for. But when we offer ourselves to God as broken, as imperfect, but as there as we are, we will be restored, recreated, sanctified, renewed, rejuvenated, all those beautiful things. And God, not only will those things happen to us, but God himself will make his abode within us.
So really, simplicity and just turning to him. Turn to him for help.
That's it.
And he will help you.
That's it.
It's so simple the modern mind can't contain it.
Exactly. It's too simple.
It's too simple. I don't like it. No, I'm kidding.
No, but it's beautiful. It's beautiful because when we do that, we realize that that's what we were created for.
Yeah.
In that moment of surrender, in that moment of turning ourselves to Christ, we're filled with that presence, with that peace, with that fulfillment.
And I think that's really comforting, and I hope it's comforting for everyone, in every stage of their lives, and especially, I keep going back to young people in college, only because I guess I'm not that old.
Me neither.
So that stage of life is really tough.
Yep.
For people, you're not settled.
Right.
In who you are and the world around you. In fact, you probably just moved away from home.
Yep. And
so that comfort, that just turn to God, give time to Him, and every time you need Him, He's there listening. That and that. What does the one prayer hymn say? The hymn, Meth imon o Theos.
God is with us.
God is with us.
Right.
We put our hope in no earthly power, but only in God.
Yeah,
it's the hymn.
Exactly.
And that's so true, though.
So true. And
it could help us psychologically because we can go insane and going around in circles.
Literally.
With everything, life is tough.
Yep. So you don't have to be perfect.
You don't have to be perfect.
You don't have to have it all together. You don't have to be that perfect, squeaky clean, have all your T's crossed and I's dotted Christian, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's okay to be broken, to be humble, to be contrite, but we can't stay there. We don't try to fix everything. We try to offer it all up to God.
Right.
We in our brokenness, in our humility, in our imperfection, we give it all up to God, and we are perfected and sanctified and enlightened and strengthened and unified by God, to God, and that's the point of everything.
Profound. Well, I think that wraps up the conversation. I think.
I believe so.
Okay.
I have faith.
Do you have faith that
the conversation
is done?
Over.
Okay. Well, there you have it, folks. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you all next time.